Hello? Okay. Did anybody win anything? All right. Junior and senior rights. Junior and senior rights are developed based on dates of creation. Understanding when the parcels were created is critical to understanding where junior and senior rights come from. Precedence is given by time, not necessarily by who created the deeds, as we'll see in a few minutes here. There are tricks to put into our bag that we as land surveyors get to use to the benefit of our clients. Because the really cool thing is, if you go to an attorney, the attorney is going to do whatever he can to fight for you. You are his client. He's going to do whatever is necessary, put whatever tweaks on whatever he can for you. We are applied attorneys. We apply the law. Okay, they're theoretical, we apply. It's kind of like a theoretical mathematician and an applied mathematician. Theoretical mathematician just like Stephen Hawking, it's just off in the clouds. Practical or applied mathematician like my daughter who teaches calculus at the high school in San Diego. She's an applied mathematician. Same way we apply the law. We use the law to help us do our job. We work for our clients. We cannot do anything that abrogates the law, that breaks the law. But when you play with the law, you will find that there are different pathways to take that kind of benefit the client better if we do it this way as opposed to that way. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing unethical about advocating for your client as long as the advocacy meets the laws. So, that's what I mean when I'm talking about working for the benefit of our client. So, we have a piece of land. That's the dates of creation there. The west 150 feet to Green in 64, and the east 150 feet to Brown in 68. Records a 300-foot wide parcel, 150 each. Big deal. Okay, straightforward, no problem. This is our field measurement today. We're 2 feet short. Where does the line go? In the middle? Not really, because if we put it in the middle, somebody gets the shaft. In this case, Mr. Green, or Miss Green, because she bought the parcel that was created in 1964, that was described as being the west 150 feet, gets all of the west 150 feet. Because when the original owner sold to Brown in 1968, he didn't have that 2-foot strip anymore. He can't sell what he doesn't own. Just like the Brooklyn Bridge. That 2-foot strip is like the Brooklyn Bridge. He didn't own it, he can't sell it. So all he can sell is what's left over. Okay? So in this case, the senior owner gets all of it. The junior owner gets what's left. Now, same case. It's actually 305 feet wide. Who's the senior owner? Green. What does Green get? 150 feet, exactly. Whatever's left over is what Mr. Brown gets. And whatever's left over is 155 feet wide. In most cases.
I gotta ask. I think the deed's written the east 150 feet. I mean, is there a gap? I mean, technically, is there a gap there?
Gaps and overlaps exist in only one place. That's in the mind of the land surveyor. They do not exist on the ground. Pardon?
What about tracks?
What about tracks?
You get
Again, gaps and overlaps exist in no other place than the surveyor's mind. If this situation here, I'm Ian Green, and we've got Joe Brown here. In this situation here, Joe's St. Augustine grass comes up to this point, and my really beautiful blue fescue goes up to this point. There is no overlap. There is no gap. It's what's been used. Somebody else comes along after the fact and says, hey, we've got a mathematical problem here. Call the attorneys. Well, if this were to ever go to court, these are the simple principles that are used. The judge, in his right mind, if he's been taught properly by a good land surveyor, is going to put that line right there and say, you know what? There is no gap. There is no overlap. Unless the surveyor can prove that there was a gap there for a particular reason. Because if you've got that 5-foot gap there, maybe it's a little wider than that. True story. I'll get into it in a second. The original subdivider intended for there to be one, then the original subdivider is still going to maintain ownership to that. Land title survey that I did in Seaside, beautiful Seaside. Anybody familiar with Seaside? The 101 right there at the Del Monte Shopping Plaza, that little shield-shaped shopping plaza, that's my map. The land title survey that we did on that tripped across through the chain of deeds and researching the history. Incredibly, there is actually an easement all the way across that site to the other side of 101. There used to be a farm over there. Okay, this is butting up against the Pacific Ocean. There's about 120 acres of ground over there. That little strip that ran all the way across the Del Monte Shopping Plaza was for water rights to a spring, to extract as much water as necessary for the use and enjoyment of the property. Yeah, it was written in 1898. 120 acres overlooking the Pacific Ocean, subdivided into 1-acre lots, with the right to pull as much water out of that spring as is necessary for the enjoyment of the property. Anybody know what a water tap fee costs in Monterey? You haven't bought any land. You haven't had a survey done. You haven't hired an architect. All you're buying is the right. You haven't even put in the tap. Just the right to tap into municipal water. A few years ago, I think it was pushing for $450,000. How much would that easement be worth today? Holy Moses. The attorneys wanted me to take that easement off there because there's nobody was using it. And I'm thinking, yeah, all I need to have is some heirs and assignees of the original parcel come back and say, wait a minute, look what we found. Believe me, my house is not worth that much. My house will never be worth a fraction of that. Getting back to where we're at here, we're going to construe against the grantor, as we do every time we can. And we're going to assume that there's no reason, unless it's stated, for that gap to be there. And if you're creating a subdivision or something around, let's say you're working for a water district. Okay, they're a quasi-government agency. They get to subdivide land by deeds today. So if you're doing something like this and creating 2 pieces of land and you want the original owner to maintain that strip, put in there the intention that there is a gap between these properties that is 10 foot wide. That gap is to be retained by the original subdivider, the original owner, for water purposes, access purposes, or whatever. So if this ever goes to court down the road, footsteps. You've left some big footsteps that nobody's ever going to have a problem with that. Is there a gap there? No. There's a strip there that we created for a specific and particular purpose. Either side of the strip goes out to the owners that we're selling to or whatever. Joe?
We have this data for a Chrysler can just leave it open. If he wants to keep it, it's not for the purpose of holding an adjacent landowners.
You're right. Yeah, if you stated the 10-foot strip, 10-foot remaining strip remaining was created intentionally, you don't have to say why. You're just saying to the future, there's a 10-foot strip here, and we meant to do this. I meant to do that. Whoops. Now, we're in the year 2012. Katink. You'll notice down here, that's from 1927. We are not dealing with brand new problems just because it's 2012. We've been dealing with these problems for thousands of years, believe me. This is a court case from the Supreme Court of Appeals in West Virginia in 1927. The way to read this, by the way, and I'll use the pointer on this one, this is a legal citation. This is the appellate decision. This is the Supreme Court of Appeals. West Virginia is a little different than California. You have the Superior Court, the Appeals Court, the Supreme Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court of West Virginia. So you have 4 chains in West Virginia, as opposed to 3 in California. This decision comes from this. This is United Fuel and Gas Company versus Townsend. These guys brought the suit, the appeals case. These guys are defending the appeal. These are the plaintiffs. These are the defendants. It was heard in the Supreme Court of Appeals of West Virginia in 1927. It's reported, this decision is recorded in SE, which is Southeast Reporter. A reporter is a bound document that collects all these appeals decisions together and publishes them on a regular basis. And you will find that it is in book 139 of the Southeast Reporter, and this case starts at page 856. This decision, interestingly, is actually quoting from Westco, Western Company, versus Peytona Company. That decision is found in the 8th book of West Virginia Reporter, starting at page 406, and there might be a second part of that case or an additional part of that case that started on page 418. So that's actually, you can actually go to the law library or online if you're willing to pay a few $1,000 a month and suck this case right out of the net or get it online or get it actually in print form at a local law library. Every county in California, by the way, by law, is required to have a law library, a public law library. Sometimes they're in the county seat. Sometimes they're not. You can find them online very easily by going to the county website and looking, doing a search for law library. And it's, if you've got anything going on, it's really worthwhile taking a look at these decisions and reading through them. They're a little difficult to read through at first, but after a while you start getting to know what they mean and how to play with them. And there's some wonderful bits of writing in there. But yeah, this is from 1927. They've been dealing with these gaps and overlaps for a long, long time. A decision from West Virginia does not bind California courts from following the same way, because their laws are different than ours. But in general circumstances like this, you got a gap or an overlap. Gaps or overlaps happen in the minds of surveyors in West Virginia just as they do in California. This is how they handle it in West Virginia. Maybe this is how we should think about it in California, unless there's something really definitive that you can point to that says we shouldn't do that. You can bring that up. Courts don't like to make just completely new law. They want to step on what was there before. They'll tweak it a little bit and move it just a little bit each time, but they're never just going to go 180 degrees and do something completely different. Okay, so that's why understanding court cases and reading them is really important for us, because that's how the courts are thinking today. A lot of these decisions will go back into the late 1800s, early 1900s, because the decisions have been around for that long. There's little tweaks of them. There are ways to be able to go into and search for any cases since then that have relied on that decision, and or have refuted that decision. You want to be able to read those to make sure that you're up on the current thinking, because there is a little tweak that goes the way that you don't want it to do. You need to know that too. Okay? Has everybody heard of Justice Cooley and the famous judicial function of land surveyors? Okay, Justice Cooley was he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Michigan back in the late 1800s. In 1881, he wrote The Judicial Functions of Surveyors, and a couple of these are extracts directly from there. I apologize for this slide, and others like it. I don't like slides with a lot of writing on them, particularly when the bozo sits there and reads it to you. It's there for you to read. The citations are there for you to get hold of, but there's some important elements to take away from here that I just can't get away from putting this big tract of text up here, unfortunately. But what we're looking at here is that the whole point here is that surveyors supposedly are trained in an exact science, the science of measurement. And if we rely on that exact science of measurement, which we've already seen is not so exact, we really could screw things up. What we really need to do is practice an art that's beyond the science. I was very fortunate enough early in my career to meet Kurt Brown, and before he died, we met a number of times and spoke a number of times. And one of the things that he often did was he compared land surveying to the medical arts. In that doctors constantly use sciences, x-rays, blood tests, all kinds of things, and base their diagnosis on the results of those scientific tests. But practicing of medicine, like the practice of land surveying, is an art. We use the science to help direct our decisions in applying the science, but it's the art that we are really licensed for that we're making these decisions based on. Is there an engineer in the crowd? Okay. Engineering is a definition of engineering is applied physics. If you've got a degree in physics, you don't need to sit the EIT. You can go straight to the PE exam and sit that. Because the idea, the thinking there is that the entire body of civil engineering that's going to be tested is nothing more than the application of physical laws that with a degree in physics you already are very familiar with, theoretically. But when you think about it, physics, the application of physics really with physical laws, there really isn't a whole lot of interpretation. If you've got a gap of 100 feet across a canyon, there really isn't too much interpretation in figuring out what the beam size is you're going to need to span that, or what you're going to do with it. There's a very limited amount that you can do with that. Now, the architect gets to put all the proof on the side of it or whatever, but you're really applying a very hard science. Land surveyors are applying law, which is a social science. It's not a hard science. My problem is that I'm a degreed hard scientist. I'm a chemist. How the hell I fell into land surveying, I'll never know, but I was very, very lucky to do so. But I understand and I proceed with the understanding that I'm using a social science and interpreting that and practicing my art. That's why we're licensed. We are practitioners of an art. Hopefully I'll live for a good few years, and every one of those years I will be learning something. Every day of every year I learn something relative to land surveying that helps me out in my practice. I'm constantly improving. And yeah, I'm always practicing. If everything that we did was based on measurement, the lines would constantly be moving with whoever comes in there and measures better or claims to measure differently or measures from a different side or whatever. We would always have problems. And that's not fair to the property owners. I buy a piece of land, I'm relying on that to be my piece of land, and I'm relying on it to go from here to here, as the original slide did from the water to the two stones. And I've got a right to rely on that. I have a right to not have a surveyor come in and screw those rights up just because he can measure better, thinks he can measure better than the last guy in there. And this is where Justice Cooley was getting at with this. We have a real need to be able to take into account what's already happened, even if we think it's wrong, to maintain the harmony in the neighborhood so the people's property rights aren't being damaged, because that's why we're licensed. Nobody else can go out and locate boundaries on the ground because they're not licensed. In the state of California, the Beeples gives us the right to go out and mark boundaries after we pass the test because we are now licensed to do so. It's very, very particularly protected and granted because we're practicing an art, and we could really do a lot of damage. When you think about it, land is the basis of all wealth. You talk about the gold standard, that's bull. The only reason the gold had any standard was because it allowed people to buy land and hire men to protect it. What value is it beyond that? It's land. That's where land is derived from. That's where wealth is created. There was a land surveyor back in the heyday a few years ago. In my private practice, we had a dozen or more parcel maps in progress at any one time. We were subdividing 20-plus acres of parcels into 4, 5-plus acre parcels. And it turns out that psychologically, 20 acres of land is a big chunk of ground to take care of. So the cost per acre of a 20-acre parcel of land is considerably less than the cost per acre of a 5-acre parcel of land. And in Anza, in western Riverside County, where a lot of my practice was, we could buy a 20-acre parcel of land for about $250,000. We told our clients that you're going to spend anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to do the subdivision, the design of a road, and in some cases the construction of the road in there for the parcel map, and in realtor fees. Okay, so you're going to have about $350,000 wrapped up in 4 parcels of ground. Each of those parcels are going to go anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 or more apiece, depending upon location. I am the only person, as a land surveyor, on the face of this planet, authorized by law to create money from dirt. That's why we are very carefully monitored. That's why we are required to be licensed. Because we could really screw things up if we weren't. All of these concepts, as far as boundaries concerned, are general concepts that may or may not hold up in each case. Every case in boundary is extremely fact-driven. One single fact could change the whole thing. And you've really got to be cognizant of that. I mean, when you file the final map, you're sitting there going, man, have I got everything? We hope we have. Most cases are relatively straightforward. You're not going to be plunged into cases that go all the way up to California Supreme Court every boundary survey that you do. In my practice, since being licensed in 1993, I've been in court a total of 3 times. Each one of those 3 cases, the boundary issues really were secondary issues to contract issues. I've never lost a boundary issue. I've never won a contract issue. Land surveying is a great way to make a small fortune. You have to start with a very large fortune up front, but junior and senior rights. And we talked about the fact that you grant away the west 150 feet to somebody, and they're going to have the senior rights to that. Well, that kind of sucks. Just because I'm selling a piece of property, I'm going to get screwed? Not necessarily. Here's a trick for the bag of the conscientious land surveyor working for his client. Reservations and exceptions are used to allow the grantor to retain senior rights. There's a piece of ground, 300 feet. Lot 6, except the west 150 feet. So I'm selling all of Lot 6 except 150 feet. So I'm going to get 150 feet regardless, just like the senior situation. This is how I keep the senior rights, even though I'm granting the property away. It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it.
Yes. That's why we need to have an understanding of what we're doing so that we can work on behalf of our clients. We're not breaking any laws here. But why? Because he owns the property and he's subdividing it. Should he get screwed? This is a way to, if that's what he wants to do, work to make sure that he's not. The other way to do it is Lot 6, reserving the west 150 feet. Exception and reserving are pretty well the same. Reserving generally deals with a strip of land, reserving the westerly 30 feet for road purposes or road and utility purposes. And what it's saying, when you run into that in a deed, you've got the east 50 feet except the easterly 30 feet reserved for road and utility purposes. You do not own title to that easterly 30 feet. Your client does not get title to that. He gets the strip of land over there up to that line 30 feet west. Okay? I'm keeping that 30 feet for some other reason. Now be very, very careful, because if you reserve something like that and you create, if you were to pull 30 feet off the east side of this, and you've got a strip in there 120 feet wide with a gap, 120-foot gap between the very easterly 30 feet and the rest of this thing here, courts are going to look at that and go, well, that's really kind of screwy. Two pieces of ground separated, we're going to treat that as an easement, which they have done.
Regardless of intent?
Well, what the court basically says is we kind of understand what you were trying to do, but because it wasn't really spelled out well, we're going to construe it against you. And nobody in his right mind would put a strip in the middle.
I think just by simply saying for a particular purpose, you're starting to march into the land of easements.
Yeah. And there's a great body of case law. Does everybody know the difference between statute law and case law? Statutes are what you find in the government code and the business code, the criminal code. That's laws that are created in Sacramento that cover the whole state. Okay, those are the state laws. Case law is the court's way of interpreting those statutes when there's any ambiguity or anything going on in there. Case law amplifies statute until somebody comes along in the legislature or can work with the legislature to say, that's not really what we meant, so we're going to change the statute and stamp on top of all the case law. And the case law that was built up, you enact a statute, there's case law that builds up over the years that amplifies that. There's a new statute enacted to take care of those problems. All of that case law disappears. You now got a new statute that gets amplified and changed until somebody else fixes it. Lot line adjustment is a perfect example of that. The statutes prior to 2001 specifically said that you could subdivide, you could adjust as many parcels as you wanted. There was no 4-lot limit. There were differing opinions all over the state. There were a couple of very expensive and contentious lawsuits in San Diego, San Bernardino, and San Simeon that caused the legislature to go in and make an amendment to that, and that's where the 4 lots came. It was in 2001. So all the case law dealing with however many lots you could actually change in a lot line adjustment disappeared the minute the new version of 66412D went into effect. So that's the difference between case law, statute law, and then case law. So getting back to this here, with the easement, case law.
Could you repeat, did you say that there's a limit to the number of, or a change in the limit to the number of parcels that can be adjusted in lot lines?
Yes. Prior to 2001, you could do as many as you wanted. After 2001, you can only do 4. Talking about beyond state statutes, there are also local ordinances, okay? Just as with the federal Constitution that grants to the federal government certain rights and certain powers, anything that isn't specifically granted to the states or specifically granted to the federal government is reserved for the states. Likewise, in every state, there's a state constitution, and every power that is not reserved or granted to the state is reserved for the local jurisdictions. So if the state statute says, you can't have a local ordinance that says, not so much. You can have a local ordinance that says, yeah, and. Okay? But it can't go against the state statute. 4 lots or fewer is now the standard in the lot line adjustment. Middle of January, there's a city, I'm going to leave it that way. There's a city north of Sacramento, over toward north and west of Sacramento, that just got a new city attorney. And she opined in the city council meeting in the middle of January that there was actually a time period for doing lot line adjustments, that you could only do one lot line adjustment every 5 years as an owner of property. I have called and left messages and asked her repeatedly where she's getting that from. She may have a good reason. I can't imagine what it is, but I haven't had any calls back from her. So the last message I left basically said, if you have anybody doing a lot line adjustment in your city that has a lot of money, have them give me a call. I'll do it for free. That's how we get things fixed.
Can you have the local jurisdiction to put an ordinance for the time limit of lot line adjustment?
No. Well, if you could come up with a reason as to why that would be. But, for example, the city of San Diego kind of whipped one through there and said, you know, we're not going to let you do any more than 4 lots. That's not in the state statute. There's nothing there. To tighten it up like that could be seen, and it was, in San Diego Developers v. City of San Diego. The policy was overturned by the courts, and they said that it was unduly, what's the word I'm looking for? Restrictive, thank you, to the developers. So they allowed a huge lot line adjustment that adjusted many, many lots all at once, which is why they turned around and started working on changing the statutes.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about like limit the numbers of the lots.
Yeah, that's exactly what was going on. San Diego had a policy that said you can't do more than 4.
Not parcels, but how many times that, let's say 4 parcels can be subdivided numerous times within 4 parcels?
Again, I would,
Not subdivided.
yeah, but adjusted. So you got the 4 parcels, you adjust them one way, and then a year later you adjust them another way, and then you change them. There's nothing in there, as far as I can see, that limits you to do that.
But that's exactly what the city attorney is trying to
Yes,
quash.
that's right. Still have no idea why. I can't figure it out.
Who does that, and why would anyone care?
Order of preference, right?
Because, well, statutes come about because of a problem. The only reason laws are enacted is because we want people to stop doing that. It's illegal to kill somebody in California because killing people is a problem. Okay, so we're taking care of the problem by saying thou shalt not kill. Speeding. Speed kills. So we're not going to let anybody drive faster than 70 miles an hour on certain designated highways. So statute is a reaction to a problem. It's a way to fix a problem. Case law comes along to try to interpret what the legislators were trying to, the problem they were trying to solve and how they were trying to solve it. In many cases, yeah, it does screw things up.
Is case law just at the appeals court level, or if the lower court makes a decision? Is that...
No, Superior Court level, the appeals are never published and they are not binding on any other court. The appellate decisions are they are binding, but the Superior Court may be working with a pair of appellate decisions, one that goes one way and one that goes the other way. And the Superior Court may say, well, we think this one's the opinion to go with, so we're going to go this way. And on appeals, somebody says, no, this case is the one that you should have used, so it should go this way. And the appeals court either agrees or disagrees, and depends upon which way it goes. But yeah, the appellate court decision is theoretically binding, but in most cases, in most appeals cases, you're going to read there that the facts that are presented in the appeal are based on other appellate decisions that are contradictory or seemingly contradictory.
What about language that says the above parcels encompass one parcel of land on a lot line adjustment? So say that's language that the county wants in a lot line adjustment at the bottom. So you had 3 parcels,
Mm-hmm.
the west half of whatever,
Okay,
the east half of something.
right.
You adjust with your neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
third parcel. And your legal description reads the east half and then the west half, and including a portion of your neighbor's parcel.
Okay.
And at the bottom, they say the above description is one parcel.
I'd have to take a look at that, but my first reaction is whoever is requesting that at the local jurisdiction doesn't understand interpreting legal descriptions well enough to be able to make any comments about them. Because if you've got the east half of Lot 1 together with the east half of Lot 1 together with the west half of Lot 2, I just told you that you've got one lot that's made up of 3 parts. Why I would need to go back in and say, oh, by the way, all 3 of these are together in one parcel, I'm not sure about. I remember with any legal description, I want to keep that down to as few words as I possibly can, but still convey the idea. Because what happens is when you get really clever and throw in all those extra words, that's when you trip. It's the extra words that end up causing you to fall flat in your face. So anyway, reservations and exceptions. A terrific way to prevent the grantor from getting everything construed against him. Barring the exception of the reservations, and even then, really, when you think about it, the first division determines seniority. It just depends. Exceptions and reservations turn the direction.
Think about doing the lot, the adjusting the lot lines for different parcels, different ways, so many different times.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a tax purposes?
Bingo. Actually, not necessarily for tax purposes, mostly for lease purposes. Anybody know what county has the most lot line adjustments of any county in the state of California? No. No. Who said it? Exactly. Napa County. Why? Exactly. Because now we're going to put in Merlot. We're going to do Merlot on this parcel. We're going to do a lot line adjustment and use that bit for bank financing. Yeah. They're by far and away. Napa County has more lot line adjustments than any other county in the state. Amazing. Because it's a hell of a tool. We can reconfigure the land very quickly without going through the mess of a parcel map or a final map. It's very useful. We just need it cleaned up. Not sure how to do that yet, but we're working on it, I promise.
Make the land surveyor a part and parcel, so to speak, no pun intended, of the lot line adjustment. Right now, it's not required.
Actually, it is.
No, it's not.
It is by sort of sideways stuff.
Yeah, but not required sideways enough for counties to acknowledge this and practice it as such.
I don't know of any county off the top of my head.
Contra Costa County.
Oh, well, Contra Costa County is like, I mean, you can't even count that as part of California, for God's sakes.
It's the planners.
Yeah.
County planning.
Yeah.
That checks and stamps.
Yeah.
Lot line adjustments. They have no idea.
Bring that up when we get into lot line adjustments, because, I'll ask you guys some questions, too. So we have two parcels here, side by side, created out of the parent parcel. White has the west 150, black has the east 150. White bought the property in 71, black bought the property in 68. Which one's junior, which one's senior? We don't know, because all we have is a conveyance. So we need to get the title company to give us a chain of title going back. So we get the chain of title. The chain of title from black comes in first. Black bought the parcel from pink in 68. Pink bought it from yellow. What's really cool is that when you read any of the law digest or law books, they deal with property ownership in one of two ways. The owners are always colors, or they're things like Greenwoods or Green Acres or Blackmore or something like that. I don't know why, it's just tradition. Why do land surveyors have plumb bobs? It's tradition. We don't even need a plumb bob anymore, we've got laser plummets. Okay, so pink bought from yellow in 58, yellow bought from brown in 52. Now we're looking at the chain of title of white. Blue to white in 71, green to blue in 60, red to green in 58, brown to red in 47. Now we know which one is senior. Brown owned both of them, sold off the west half to red in 1947, and then in 1952 sold off the east half to yellow. Bingo. There's the creation of the junior-senior deeds. Now you'd have to take a look at that. You'd also have to read that description, because it could be that Brown sold off and reserved or accepted. So sometimes they're not always dates. It's a history. It's like a little Easter egg hunt every day. That's what we do. We get to go out there and find Easter eggs.
Does the inheritance right play into the decision making here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What was that?
Does the inheritance rights play into the chain of title? Usually the most convoluted chain, the second most convoluted chain of title comes from inherited rights. I remember a case that I was actually dealing with, and in a way, they're inherited rights. There's a piece of property near Porterville that was foreclosed on in the early 20s by the Bank of Italy. And in the late 30s, it was sold by the Bank of America. And the title agent said, I have no idea how it went from the Bank of Italy to the Bank of America. And I said, you're kidding. Really? Well, the gentleman who started the Bank of Italy was a squid fisherman in San Francisco. And got a little bit of money, bought his boat, got a little bit more money and helped other fishermen buy their boats, and became the Bank of Sicily. When he became an American citizen, he was so damn proud of it. By the way, I'm a naturalized American citizen too, so I know his feeling. He was so proud of it, he changed the name of the bank to the Bank of America. It didn't change title. It changed the name of the bank. That's all. So the title officer looks at him and goes, how the hell do you know that? Well, there's a book written by John Jakes, the hell was it? And it dealt with exactly that. It was like, so, land surveyors, we're historians as well as practicing applied attorneys. And it's those little stupid facts you suddenly draw out and go, oh, wait a minute. That novel that I read 10 years ago just helped me figure out this boundary. We're a really weird profession. Thank God.
Join your local historical society.
Yes. We're doing a land title survey for one of my favorite burger chains in the city of Encinitas. And I was just down there doing a little bit more work on the drainage and stopped into the city offices. And while I was cooling my heels waiting, there's this book, History of Encinitas, Photographic History of Encinitas. I'm flipping through this thing. And there's a photograph of our parcel from the 1920s. Not sure what. It's an aerial photograph. You can see a big chunk of it, and I'm looking at it going, oh, crap. That's the way it looked originally. That's what's going on with the drainage here. So I'm sat there photographing and this book, this photograph, and sending it back to the office saying, Jason, look what I found. Only a land surveyor would understand that. Hey, wow! So moving along that list of items, written intentions of parties. I may have to step this up a little. Cool little parcel of ground. Beginning at the northeast corner of the lot, dink, going west, 12 rods. And by the way, just because we don't use rods anymore, or perches, or furlongs, doesn't mean you're not going to find them in the legal descriptions, because they're all there, believe me. Worst one ever that I've run across, and it was actually in the description for a rancho in south of San Diego, smokes.
What was it?
Smoke. How, and believe it or not, there's actually a legal decision recorded, and there's an appellate decision on what the hell smoke is. And the decision is, they actually gave a certain distance for it, but it was the length of time the average guy walking on the average horse took to smoke the average cigarette.
Whoa, wow.
The distance covered in that time. That's what a smoke is. You're kidding.
I read something too about how the guy either smoked it, was it when he struck the match, and did he smoke it all the way to the butt?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, has anybody read Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit? Does anybody remember the party at the beginning of The Hobbit when all the elves are asking Bilbo for his tobacco, and Gandalf makes the comment about how tightly you pack your pipe depends upon whose tobacco it is. If it's yours, it's real loose. If it's your host's, as tight as you can suck. So yeah, I always thought the smoke was a cool distance. By the way, the vara, as defined in Texas by statute, is different than the vara as defined in New Mexico by statute. And if you don't know where you're at, you're in deep doo-doo. Our foot. Anybody know the conversion for the metric conversion in California for a foot?
37.
Exactly. 1 meter equals 39.37 inches. Yeah. Not the 3.2808, which is the international foot and will screw you royally. Not so much in dealing with real small coordinate numbers, but when you're dealing with state planes, you're dead. And there's Marty in the back there going, yep. Does everybody know Marty Ikehara, by the way? She's our NGS liaison in California. Great lady, lots of good information. South, bada-boom, along the west side, bada-boom. East, 25.5 rods. This is going great. We're not having any trouble. Oh, crap. It's not 25 rods. We go straight east, and it's 26.7 rods. Not only that, but we go up there, and it's 30.8 rods, and we're in deep trouble because we have a problem. However, if we decide that east isn't to be held, we're going to hold a distance, look, it all works out. If we go 25.5 rods at that angle, then we're 30.3 rods from the point of beginning. Hey. So in this case, the discrepant element is east. Direction over distance, we're tossing the direction. And of course, this is very, very recently decided in 1870. C, by the way, is California Reporter. You'll also see C2, C3, C4, and I don't think we're at C5 yet. That's California Reporter, Second Reporter, Third California Reporter. And you can find those on the shelf of any law library in California. Go straight to page, pull up book 39 of the first California Reporter, go straight to page C12, and you'll find the beginning of Ferris v. Felon to be able to read that case. Calls to a prior survey. This is an example taken directly from my case files. Very good doctor, owned a piece of property, called me out, a wonderful client. Originally an Air Force doctor, was the flight surgeon for the Blue Angels for many years, lives in south of Hemet. Really cool guy, he's in his 80s, still travels all over the world, has a hell of a lot of land. He was very fortunate to marry a lady who was from a very wealthy family who owned a hell of a lot of land around Southern California, and a very neat guy. So he actually has, his house is next door over here in lot 17. So he decides he's subdivided his whole area. Now he's going to sell off lot 16. But he wants to sell it off in two pieces. He wants to do subdivision of this thing, and in particular, because his house is up on the hill, and the property to the side of him here is also a little bit further down the hill, he wants to make sure that whoever's going to build on it can't build where it's going to screw up his view. So he calls me out and says, Ian, I want you to walk this with me to figure out where we're going to put this boundary. Here's what's going on. So we're up there, and it's like, okay, this is about where the north line of the property is. I'd surveyed a number of his properties before. So we slap in a lath. And we walk down toward the south, and he goes, yeah, bring that line to about here. Okay, slap in another lath. And we walk some more. Bring that line to about here. Okay. And I want it to end up about here on the south line. Okay. So I go out with my crew, find all four corners of the parcel, lot 16. Hell, I did the thing. I better be able to find them. We subdivide, slap in hubs next to each one of these laths. Pop in the bearings and distance, the whole thing, but boom, 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 subdivide it, do a little parcel map, and off to the, actually we couldn't, we were at final map and, tentative map and final map at that point because he'd subdivided everything else around there. Bada boom, there we go.
Southwest 15.
Oh, shit, okay, that should have been, good catch, good catch.
I know it's not the scale, but I was just copying.
Yeah, copy paste. It's the bane of our existence. Actually, you know, as much as I love Apple products, the conversion from PowerPoint to Keynote is not perfect. So, you know, I've missed parts of this conference frantically trying to get Apple to figure out how to, or Keynotes to figure out how to do this, and I must have missed that one. I'm sorry. That middle one should be southeast. But you can see what's going on there. But that's a great catch. And in fact, if this were a legal description, you get southwest, 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 you're going to look at it and go, hey, the only way this thing would really work is if this was actually southeast. And the court's going to go, you know, you're right. Good catch. They're not going to defeat the deed just because of that. So, but let's go back a little bit and let's take this away from reality here. This is prior to March 4 of 1972. It's a date you have to commit to memory because after that date, no more divisions by deeds except for the government. Prior to that, everybody could divide by deed. Because in California, we all know that the government holds a policy of do as I say, not as I do. Just like you do at home with your kids. Do as I say. I always used to hate that. So this is prior to March 4, 1972. We're dividing this for the good doctor by deeds. Okay, so we put the deed together. We've got the dimension across the top there, or whatever's going on. Boom, the deeds go through. Somebody comes back in 10 years later and does a survey and finds out that, oh, the distance across the top is incorrect. This is where the line should be. Whoop. Let me get back there. The principle that is going to hold here is the fact that, as shown by the plat of survey by, so this description is referencing a survey. The concept here is that the description is clearly based on the survey, and the survey went from point to point to point. The description just screwed up. Even if this survey is not recorded. If it's not recorded, you may have a hard time finding that survey, but if you go out there and you find all 4 of those original wooden hubs, you can sit back and go, you know what? I think these were here for a particular reason. And they, by God, the angular relationship between all 4 of these hubs fits the description of that set of lines right there. The only problem is that we're just screwed up on the bearing from the northwest corner over to the new split line. So you're really going to want to be very careful, but the map is going to hold because you've said, as shown on a plat.
Is that the reason title companies like to throw away the map?
No, it doesn't matter because you can go out there and find evidence. I found evidence 120 years old of original monumentation. You just have to be a lot smarter and a lot more diligent. Calls for monuments. A monument is a physical thing, whether it's a natural monument or an artificial monument. It is a physical thing, a pipe or a tree or a rock or whatever. There's actually a couple of easements written out in Southern California that use Highway 95 as one of the limits of the easements. So Highway 95 now is this really long, flat, black monument. A corner is a mathematical thing. It's not a physical thing. And it's the intersection of 2 or more lines, 1 or more of which may be curved. Because you might have a point that 5 property lines all come to, dink. Okay? And of course we got curves. You could have 2 lines being curved and intersecting and creating a corner. We use them interchangeably all the time. But remember, monument and corner are not the same thing. Yes. There is a horrendous opinion that just came out dealing with monuments and corners. And basically, I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes here, because this is let me preface this with 2 things. Number 1, I am not an attorney. I'm not licensed to practice law in the state of California. I'm a land surveyor. I'm an applied attorney. Number 2, this is a political statement because of exactly what's going on here. Okay, this is a very straightforward concept. There's an opinion that was handed down by an attorney, I'm going to leave it at that, who carries some weight, who pointed out that all monuments are witness corners. Yeah. Yeah, it was...
Is that an AG opinion?
No, it wasn't an AG opinion. It was another opinion. But essentially what he was saying is that every monument that's ever been set is incorrect. So what he's saying is, even if you find an original undisturbed monument, don't worry because it's been set incorrectly. Go to the mathematical bit instead. Wow!
How much?
Fortunately, he doesn't have any real authority. And the first time that goes to... the first idiot who thinks to take that to court is going to get the stuffing kicked out of him. The word to. The word to often comes around when you're using monuments. And in a call, the word to gives you a really cool place. And we can all see where the word to is there. Can you guys see this all the way back? Good. Because what we can do with this is break this up into two clauses, what comes before the word to and what comes after the word to. Everything before is informative. It's just some information. Everything that comes after is the absolute location. So you could actually read this. Thence to an iron pipe. The bearing and direction just helps you get to the pipe. Now that's assuming there isn't a senior line in between where you are and the pipe is, but we're going to that pipe. That's my license number, by the way, so nobody's going to get offended but me. This is, back when I was working with Caltrans, this is an actual description that was brought to me, and the person who brought it to me went, have you ever seen something so stupid in all your life? And I read through it and I thought, Beecher's Corners, maintenance station, also known as Kramer Junction, intersection of 58 and 395. I've been out of Southern California for too long. It's in section 5. 395, boom. 395, interestingly, until recently, was there by prescriptive rights. It used to be the old construction and maintenance road for the power lines that came down from up in Northern California, where you guys stole not only our water, but our power. Now I'm up in Northern California. And this is how it got down to down through the Cohen Pass. So they built this road all the way to, they didn't build this road, it was just a cart path. But if you wanted to get down to San Bernardino, you had to go 40 odd miles to the east and then come down with what's now the 15, roughly with the 15 corridor. So it was a hell of a lot easier just to drive down here. Everybody did it. So the people gained prescriptive rights to 395. State doesn't have the fee, doesn't have an easement, we just have prescriptive rights. So at that point, nobody really knew where 395 was. Some of the last things I did at Caltrans with a lot of the boundary surveys along there trying to figure out where we needed it to be. But there's the description for Beecher's Corners Maintenance Station that starts off at the section corner, easy enough to find. It's a big brass cap there. Down the west line of the section 5, a particular distance to a line parallel with the north line of the section. And then it takes off across there and it goes 6,000 feet east. That's wider than the section. To the westerly sideline of 395. The distance doesn't matter. We know the line's the direction is parallel with the north line of the section. We can figure that out from the brass caps on either end of it, or in the quarter corner. We now know that the distance, doesn't matter how far it is, stops at the west line of 395 as soon as we figure out where the hell it is. You know, everybody looks at that and goes, what do you mean you don't know where 395 is? It's right there. He's like, no, legally, I mean. Thence south, easterly, along the westerly sideline of 395 to a line parallel with as X number of feet south as measured perpendicular to the north line of the section. So now we've got another bearing. We're changing the basis of bearings all the way through this, by the way. 6,000 feet to, anybody get a guess? The west line of section 5. Thence north to the point of beginning. Is that deed stupid or does it do the job? Does it do the job in such a way that it doesn't matter what happens with 395? Beecher's Corners Maintenance Station is safe. So it's not crazy. It does the job.
Couldn't that deed also be evidence to the location of 395 though too?
Not necessarily, because we don't know where it is, and we've given it a ridiculous number.
Well, what I'm saying is, couldn't that deed be evidence to where 395 is supposed to be?
If we had a particular distance from here to here that we'd done based on a field survey, yeah, it might do, but we've gone so far beyond there. Any reasonable surveyor is going to go 6,000 feet? You're now in section 4. That's crazy. Well, the reason that it was done that way is because it was specifically designed to be nuts. So that anybody competent would look at it and go, that distance is really dumb.
Couldn't you accomplish the same thing by not putting a distance?
Yeah, except you're going to find that there's jurisdictions that have these little checklists, and if you don't have bearing distance for each of the courses, it's like, this doesn't work, you can't file this. Okay?
Do you ever rewrite a description like that for a client to make it more clear?
Unless there is a really, really good reason to rewrite a legal description, you do not want to touch it because there's history behind there that you may not fully understand. Natural monuments. Natural monuments are the permanent objects. Lakes, ponds, trees. The Great Salt Lake that the sun rises out of in the morning that God gave us. When you have a conflict between a natural one and an artificial monument, most of the time, the tie goes to the natural monument. Because as we said earlier, it's really easy to move that 1-inch iron pipe. It's bloody hard to move that 3-foot diameter oak tree.
Considered a monument if it wasn't called? Because you said that they didn't recognize the tree in the description.
No, in that case,
So it didn't,
yeah,
it didn't
Yeah.
hold weight as a monument.
bearing trees. You're right. It didn't hold weight as a monument because it wasn't called out as a monument. Bearing trees are really cool. To the iron pipe, that bears South 15 links from 48-inch pine.
Like an accessory.
Yeah, yeah. Unless if held, the natural monument would defeat the description. So you had some screwed up bit of description there that calls out for a natural monument that the deed is crap. Unless we take out that natural monument, then it falls into place. That's one way to defeat a natural monument. When we have a description, the courts are really, really loath to say, that's junk. Reason being, somebody paid good money to write this, even if it does look like garbage. They intended it to do a job. We just have to figure out what the intention was. And there's all kinds of descriptions that are just ludicrous descriptions. You look at it and go, are you kidding? There's a gentleman who used to work for Caltrans and taught a class on boundary and legal description writing, came up with it early in his career. And he sat back and he thought, somebody had this description written for a particular reason. There's got to be a way to make this work. And over the next 30 years, on vacations, he would do whatever research he could do, went and saw people, even on the East Coast, and got copies of letters and the whole bit. And after about 30 years' work on this thing, he actually figured out where that piece of property was. It doesn't have to be easy, but it describes a single piece of ground that somebody who's nuts as Dennis was is actually going to figure out where it is. So again, the courts are really, really reluctant to say that's garbage, we're throwing it out. So when it comes down to something like this, natural monument is held above a lot of other things, except when it screws up the description. If we just take that natural monument out, everything falls into harmony. We'll take out the natural monument. So let's go back to our deal back here. Remember we said there's conflicting elements in every single deed except the ones that I write? Bada boom. Yes. Oh, that wasn't me. That was my drafter. Sorry, Mikey, I just threw you under the bus. So, Now, we have all kinds of conflicts on here. We got the 4x4 post over there. We got the line here. Which one are we going to hold in this case? Based off unless there's something else comes up here, based off the principles we talked about, we're going to hold the north-south line. Good. Now we have this mess here. We've got the low water mark, the iron pipe up there, a distance a little bit. What are we going to hold as the north end of this line? Yes, natural monument. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Tip your waiter. Artificial monuments need to be called for in the deed. They need to be easily identified. Not necessarily by a tag, because let's say you've got a description that was written by a civil engineer in 1928 of a parcel of ground that he did the map for. He did the survey for. What tag is he going to put in there? None. They weren't registered until 1938 because of the Mulholland Dam fiasco. So, as long as it can be clearly identified, and I found monuments that were set by civil engineers back in the 20s, that they really just look different than the pipes that we have now. And you find a couple of three of them that people who accept it as being the original Cornish, and you go somewhere else and you dig and you go, wow, and it looks the same, it's about the same thickness, and it's kind of beat up the same sort of way, and you just get the feeling this is an original monument. Undisturbed. Because like the gravel pit, just because the monument moves 127 feet doesn't mean the property line moved 127 feet. Okay, that's clearly a disturbed monument.
What if you have a rebar that's been bent and you can move that rebar and find out where it went?
Oh, perfect, because that's a great question. And in my mind, yeah, the top of the rebar has been banged over, but you get that sucker and you spin it around and the bottom part of that's vertical. Yeah, it's just been screwed up. It hasn't been disturbed. I can still find what it was trying to do. And we've all been in that case. So, you guys get licensed. You're conscientious practitioners who are worth your license. You find that rebar or pipe out there that's bent over. It spins around, and you got a great place for it. What are you going to do?
You're going to maybe pull it, that mess, and reset your own tag and record.
What are you going to record?
That would be a corner record.
Probably a corner record. Exactly.
Unless
The original pipe.
Not necessarily. And there's a lot of that stuff. Yeah, you know, the GLO surveyors there was part of the legislation that was required that when you reset the monument with a pipe, you take the stone, tip it upside down, bury it right next to the pipe. You think guys were doing that? No. Not so much. And who cares? What I really care about is the fact that you're rehabilitating the monument with something that's going to be nice and permanent, and you're filing some documentation on it so that you're leaving footprints for the next poor bugger coming along to find that and go, hey, I found her tag on it. Oh, here's the documentation. She replaced his tag. Now I can jump on that because it's got a pedigree. You know, the reason that the show dogs are so expensive is because they have a pedigree. You know exactly who their sire and their mother and father were. And on back into time. Same way with the monument. You got a corner record that goes back to a record of survey, that goes back to a record of survey, that goes back to a record of survey. You now have a pedigree for that monument from when it was originally set. It's changed 5 times since then, but by God, I've got the record, the history, and the pedigree of this monument. As opposed to finding a piece of junk out there and I'm going, wow, somebody tied a goat to this, or did some really surveyor of low esteem put this in the ground and not file record on it? Yeah. To an adjoiner record line. Adjoiner means butting together, and there's actually a court case that came up with that, like everything else. So we'll go back to the slide that we had at the beginning. We're coming back around here. So some of that stuff that we saw at the beginning, now we're seeing it from with different eyes, hopefully, maybe. And suddenly maybe some of this is actually beginning to make sense. We're looking at this deed. So any distance, I mean, we know before we even step into the field, before we even go any further, we've looked at a couple of items here. We know that any distance along this north line here is going to be controlled by this north-south line. So we might have to spend... We might have to spend a bit of time breaking down the original parcel to figure out where that was, to be able to figure out where that was, to be able to figure out where that was. It's part of the job. Don't cut corners. That's where you could screw your client or get screwed by the adjoiner. There's a question over here.
I was saying, if you were paid to go out and locate some property corners, merely located one chain compass, and you found a debilitated pipe, what are you going to do? You're going to have to file a corner record on that note? You haven't changed yet. You haven't shown a material discrepancy other than it's broken open.
In my opinion, finding a monument that's of a different description at a particular point is not a material discrepancy. And I know that there's some jurisdictions that don't agree with that. But you're asked to go out and locate the corners of a piece of property. You find 4 pipes. It's a rectangular piece of property. You find 4 pipes. How do you know that those are the corners of the property? No. No.
Because people call up all the time, they're like, hey, I just need you to find it.
Yeah, I just need one corner.
And it's like, unless you actually do a boundary survey, I mean, I can go out and find lots of stuff in the ground. Unless you actually tie it to something, do record research and stuff, how do you know that that's really their corner? And it'll come back to bite you in the ass every time.
Engineer that I used to work with a lot called me up one day and said, Ian, I have a problem. My house up in Arrowhead. He had a second house up there. He said, we just went up there and there's a bloody wall built next to the garage. I was like, what? So I took a look at everything, pulled it was actually in a parcel map. Figured out what was going on. Oz owned the property back away from the main road. There's one property in between him and the main road, and there's a little cul-de-sac, little ball end cul-de-sac. What it turned out was that the subdivision, the ball end cul-de-sac, was monumented with the BCs and EC and a property line. And the real estate agent said, that's your property corner. I went to the back and went, that's your property corner. Well, the problem was the one at the front was actually the BC, or the EC, going into the ball end cul-de-sac, and the other one was a property corner for the section next door, or for the subdivision next door. So based on the real estate agent's perfect survey and location of the actual property line, the client relied on that, built a 3-foot-high brick wall, topped with a 3-foot-high louvered wood fence that Oz found when he went up and went, Ian, I think we have a problem. Guess who paid through the nose? Guess how much was left of her commission? Negative. So, yeah, you can go out and go, yeah, that's property corner. That's practicing land surveying. And as a land surveyor, if you're dumb enough to go out and go, yeah, that's the corner, you're going to get what you deserve. I didn't. Many years ago, brand new party chief went to stake out rectangular building on a rectangular lot, Otay Mesa, one of the first lots in the entire commercial subdivision that had anything built on it. Every parcel was identical. Every parcel was large enough that there was a fire hydrant at the southwest corner of every single one of the properties, and there was a street light. Must have been in the middle. Everything looked like the same thing. So I was going down there, and we were going to stake this building, rectangular building, on lot 13. Get down to the corner, lot 16, lot 15, lot 14, lot 13. Here we go. This is a simple rectangular building, had the whole thing strapped up, done in a day, back in the office. I get a call that night from my owner, my boss, the owner of the company. He goes, Ian, you lead a charmed life. Well, what do you mean? He goes, Ian, I just got a call from the owner of the property that you just staked today. I said, yeah, what's up, Larry? You did a great job. Everything fit. He goes, yeah, you staked it on the wrong lot. Turns out that the corner, the real estate, the guy who put up the signs for the real estate agent screwed up. It was lot 15 on the corner, not lot 16. So Larry said, I'm going, oh shit, I'm looking for a new job now. Larry goes, you need to call the owner, this is his phone number, and explain to him what went on. So I'm thinking about what goes on. I call the guy, and he goes, okay, what's your explanation? I said, well, you know, he goes, okay, what could you do that this will never happen again? I thought, I should have shot the distance to the intersection out there in the streets because that would have been really long, and I would have known there was something screwed up. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, you don't recognize my voice, do you? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. It's Rocky De La Fuente. If anybody's from San Diego, used to be a guy who was very wealthy, a Cadillac owner, landowner. He was a good friend of my dad's. He says, this is Rocky, Mr. De La Fuente. Say hi to your dad. I'll pay for you to come down and stake it again tomorrow, as long as you promise this will never happen again. Yeah, charmed life. So yeah, just because it's a property corner or just because it's a monument doesn't mean it's the property corner. You need to check it in. One thing I tell many of my clients when we're talking about this is that your property is a piece in a jigsaw puzzle, and it has to fit into the puzzle of every other piece around there before we get a picture. And I need to go and figure out where the picture is to figure out where your lot is sometime. I got a long block in somewhere up in San Bernardino County. Can't remember exactly what the city was. But I was doing a boundary survey for somebody who owned one lot in there. There were no interior monuments on the lot. And I was at the block corners. And, you know, I checked in with a woman, said, you know, I'm surveying. And after a couple of hours, she gets in her vehicle and comes screaming down the street. What the hell are you doing down here? My lot's up there. I was like, yeah, I know that, but I'm trying to figure out exactly where. I used that story and explained what was going on. I was like, oh, you have to come down here all this way? I was like, yeah, sometimes. So the moral of the story is just because it's a monument doesn't mean it is the monument. Check it. Or hope to God it's owned by somebody your dad knows really well. Senior lines control. So, you grab the deed, Green's deed. To the east line of Brown, hey, cool. Grab Brown's deed. To the east line, the west line of Green. As one of my mentors told me, your research has just begun. Now's when you need the chain of title. Calls for direction and distance, calls for distance and direction. This drives me nuts. None of my field crews does this more than once. If they're going out there doing a boundary survey and they can't find a monument, they don't come in and say, hey, Chief, we just didn't find the monument. They come in and say, hey, we didn't find the monument because there's 60 feet of fill on it right now. It looks like it was brand new. Okay, I can dig that. Don't ever come in and tell me you didn't find a monument. I want to know why you didn't find it. Because that's as important as finding it or not finding it. So, you know, we said the pipe holds, except if it's gone. Now what? Is lunch, okay. Well, we're almost at 12. Let's just go through this slide real quick. Because we're talking about the distances. There's the description. We're carving this out, except we find that this little piece right here is nowhere near 200 feet. It's only 150 feet. We can blow off the distance in this case. Because 200 feet would put, if we use 200 feet, we're way off that angular measurement here. Particularly if we've got other lines in the subdivision here that we're looking at and going, hey, the intent of this thing was they were carving out 4 rectangular parcels. They didn't mean for the line to go screwy here. So they just screwed up the distance. Interesting sometimes, CCP, anyone know what that is?
Code of Civil, California.
Actually, it's the Code of Civil Procedures. We just assume that when we're talking about California law, it's California in front of it, like B&P Code. Really, reference should be the California Business and Professions Code. The little squiggly thing is section CCP, Code of Civil Procedures, section 2077. Kind of like one of those miscellaneous sort of catch-all bits at the end of the CCP that catches all kinds of weird stuff. This has been around a very long time. That's why it has that cool language in it. Like nobody would speak that way today, unless, of course, you're in office in Sacramento. Are they going to come and get us when lunch is ready, or? Oh, okay. Then let's not go any further because we're at 12. We're back here at 1? 1:30, I believe. Wow.
Yeah, we've got entertainment at lunch.
You mean I'm not entertaining enough?
Yeah.